Hi, I'm Egzaum, and this is Magicka, an actually not boring hack and slash made by Arrowhead Studios, but published by Paradox. Yeah, we will need to get back to this. Now let's talk about the game. Plot. It's not important, but here you go anyway. You are a wizard in the world where all people possessing any magical abilities have around 80 IQ and severe autism. Go save the world from evil mage and have fun while you're at it. Luckily, game mechanics are a little more complicated than the story. The core of Magicka's gameplay is a spellcasting system based on 10 different elements. Water, life, shield, cold, lightning, arcana, earth, fire, and also ice and steam, which need to be combined first. The most important part of the system is how those elements interact with each other. Cold only makes enemies slower, but when they are wet, it freezes them, what in turn makes them very vulnerable to rocks, traveling at high speed. Fire may have low range on its own, but when combined with earth, it turns into a fireball. Another aspect of the system is the fact that you are vulnerable to your spells in the same way that your enemies are, so better be careful with this lightning while you're standing in the water or learn to use shields. Once you get to know the features of all elements, you can make your own spells, or just look up the most efficient ones. There is a shit ton of combinations, and adding just one more thing to your spell can make it much stronger, or much worse. For example, making a beam just out of arcana and lightning deals pretty nice damage. But what if you could make targets wet with the same spell? Unfortunately, you can't combine lightning with water. You can combine it with steam though. Now it's much more pleasant to look at. There are also special magics that you need to find first. Just to name a few: teleport, tornado, thunderstorm, summon Phoenix, and the best of them all, Thunderbolt. This is probably the best moment to say that the balance in this game is non-existent. But it's actually a good thing. The chaos that those spells create is incredibly fun. Now that you understand how the magic system works, it's time to talk about the campaign. First thing that you might see when playing the game is incredibly high amount of reference to everything. Chapters are named after Star Wars films. There's a shop called Graham's Workshop right next to the Warhammer. There is also a huge amount of jokes, better or worse. The game clearly doesn't take itself seriously. But if you want, you're going to die. You may have OP spells, but enemies won't just stand and take them. They will overrun you, so better have a plan for that. Enemies are also very diverse, so keep that in mind when casting spells. You don't want to use Arcana on undead, trust me. And goblins with shields are surprisingly fireproof. Adjusting your strategy to the enemies you're dealing with is absolutely necessary, if you want to stay alive, that is. Another concern is the terrain. It can be a massive detriment or huge help if you know how to use it to your advantage. Do you see this lake and armored orcs trying to pass it? I wonder what would happen if someone melted the ice. There is no one good strategy to go with, so you're encouraged to experiment. Sometimes it goes better, and sometimes worse. But the feeling of absolute power when dozens of goblins vaporize before you is well worth the trouble. Aside from regular disposable enemies and bigger ones, there are also bosses. Boss fights are definitely my favorite part of the game. All bosses are quite different from each other and very fun. They can be pretty hard, especially near the end, but they don't need to be. You see, all of them can be cheesed, and there are many strategies to do so. Only half of them involve Thunderbolt. Unfortunately, you can't cast it, or for that matter any spells affecting weather, when you're not on open air. Anyway, it's completely up to you how you want to fight bosses. Intended way, or correct way.
Oh!
Magicka was of course made in multiplayer in mind, so if you got bored from breaking the game solo, grab up to 3 of your pals and get to work. There might be some troubles on the way though. Magicka was made in 2011, so it's not quite fully compatible with modern machines. When playing alone, I had just a few little problems. 1 or 2 crashes and sometimes the game got laggy, so I needed to restart. When I tried to play multi, that's where the bugs started showing. Crashes were more frequent than friendly fire until my friend plugged in a charger into his laptop, which somehow fixed it, for the most part. As for bugs when we actually got to play, sometimes I didn't see weapons my friend was holding, but that could be fixed very easily. Sometimes we didn't see each other. My favorite was when my knife of counter-striking changed into a scythe. But only for me. When my companion picked it up, the game broke even further. But that shouldn't discourage you. Multiplayer is objectively better than single. Chaos is 3 times as big, friendly fire is the main cause of death, and the bosses are killed in seconds. Oh! On top of that, funniest shit happens in multi. So yeah, definitely play it if you're interested. The game is dirt cheap. DLCs are not. That's where Paradox comes into play. When you finish the main campaign, your next thought may be trying to play DLC campaigns with your friends. Maybe someone even has some DLCs already. But it's not that simple. If you want to play it, all of you must buy it. Why? Because we need more money, that's why. Now enter your credit card number. However, it's not the end of the video, because Magicka has got a sequel after 4 years. So, after all this time, what improvements did fans get? Better netcode, less bugs, and better graphics. Okay, let me explain. It's not like the second one has no changes. I just wouldn't call them improvements, but rather trade-offs. Well, let's start from the beginning. Sequel wasn't made by the same studio. This time it was made by Pieces Interactive. They made some DLCs for Magicka 1, so it makes sense to let them make a sequel, right? Right?
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
Anyway, gameplay got quite a few changes. First one is that you now have 4 slots for magics that can be activated by pressing a single button. Thanks to that, if you don't want to learn combinations required to cast them, you can get away with this system. But when a spell is casted that way, it needs to recharge some time, so it is still helpful to learn full combinations. And that was the smallest change. Now you can cast and charge spells while moving. This change basically requires enemies to be much faster now. Game is much more dynamic, but also more irritating. Now stopping for a bit to cast haste, because using magic still makes you stop, will cause some athletic goblins to sprint right at your face and punch you at least a few times. Sometimes game changes into a fucking Benny Hill chase. Another thing is the soft rework of the spell system. Some of the elements, interactions were changed and some are completely gone. If you really liked using a particular spell combo, now it may work differently or simply not exist. This ties to 4th change. Definitely the worst in my opinion. Spells are balanced now. At first thought, this may seem reasonable. Someone could even say that devs should strive for perfect balance. But someone would be a total fucking idiot and also probably adopt it. Magicka was never meant to be balanced. The whole gameplay in the first one was relying on the fact that using overpowered spells was fun as fuck. And now, look at what they did to Thunderbolt. Once, it was like divine punishment wielded in my hand. Now, it's closer to throwing a battery at your enemy. To be fair, I got a replacement. Sure, Thunderhead is really strong, strikes a few times, can be spammed and makes enemies wet before fucking them with lightnings. But it's just not the same. Okay, I ranted hard enough, now some positives. Spell system is much better now than when the game launched. At first you couldn't combine ice and steam with other elements, but they added it in a patch. We also got another element, poison, combination of arcana and water. Also, story is superior, it still has this Magicka's aura of stupidity to it, and writing is better. Presentation is really good, graphics are obviously improved, but sounds and music are great too. There still is true Magicka hidden in this game, I just have a feeling it's rushed, and here's why. Campaign is really short, I completed it after just 4 hours, without any cheesing or skipping sections. Second indicator is recycling recycling of enemies. If you killed a boss, expect it to come back as a normal enemy. Almost all of them do that. Magicka 2 has its problems, but if you really liked the first one, you should probably get it, but not the other way around. Last thing I'm going to talk about is why we're probably not getting Magicka 3 anytime soon. Magicka Wizard Wars was released in April 2015, and servers were closed 9 months after that. So what is this game even about? Wizard Wars was a multiplayer-only spin-off strongly based on MOBAs. Core of the game was close to the original, same spell system and general feel. Game was meant to be the moneymaker of the franchise, so why did it burn so spectacularly? First and most obvious thing that comes to mind is missing fan expectations. Most of them wanted just more Magicka, not some weird MOBA-like. Hey, that's a new term right there. But that's just the beginning. I have never played Wizard Wars, but from reading quite a few comments of the players, it seems like the game had a huge problem with hardcore players, with OP spells, so imprinted in their brains that they could probably cast them in real life, scaring more casual audience. Apparently macros were a problem too. There were a lot of other smaller issues, but devs had no time to work them out. The ship sank, and with it the whole series. Game had a lot of potential, but was never able to reach it. There still is a possibility to play it though. Small community of fans revived it, so if you want to experience it by yourself, there is a way. However, for people waiting for a proper continuation of the series, there is only hope, and not much else. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in my next videos. Have a great day. By the way, if you won't subscribe, I'll cast Thunderbolt on you. Repeatedly.